Good evening, just gone 7 PM. Welcome to a brand new week of MesmePolitics. My name is Toby Lepati Mesme, and this is MesmePolitics. Monday, the 15th of February 2021. Plenty to get to on the show. Get in touch throughout in the chat. We are bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective. On the way, Dominic Raab on Brexit, Hancock's health reforms, they're not what they seem, and a call to stop denying the reality of the government's success on the vaccination programme element of handling COVID-19. Also, over in the States, we delve into Joe Biden's approval ratings 3 weeks in, Biden's phone call with President Xi of China, and hypocrisy by the GOP when it comes to impeachment, Johnson's press conference, a northern spending splurge, but first, Peter Mandelson, the Prince of Darkness, has returned to the Labour Party. Keir Starmer is going to be seeking his help. What does this all mean? Well, this is from Squawkbox, and I'll quote it directly to you. Peter Mandelson was intensely relaxed about, quote, filthy amounts of wealth, and said worrying about working class voters was a waste of time. Now, Keir Starmer hopes bringing him in will appeal to voters who deserted Labour over Brexit. This is from The Times. Yesterday, Starmer calls in Mandelson to inject a dose of New Labour's, quote, winning mentality, as his honeymoon ends with sniping at his shadow cabinet and questions over his political noir. The party leader is putting his faith in Tony Blair's chief strategist. And I read on further from Squawkbox. Keir Starmer has called in former Blair advisor Peter Mandelson to get him out of the hole he has dug for himself, completing his headlong rush back to the worst of New Labour. Starmer has no hope of getting near real power without winning back the working class voters he drove away from Labour with his 2018 sabotage of Labour's promise to hold a new EU referendum by saying, quote, nobody is ruling out Remain as an option, and has embarrassingly draped himself in the Union flag as if that's what working class people want to see. Unsurprisingly, working class people see right through the ruse, and both Starmer and Labour have fallen sharply in the polls. So now Captain Forensic has decided that the way to save himself is to bring in Peter Mandelson, the elitist peer who infamously said that worrying about working class voters was a waste of time because they've got, quote, nowhere to go. Mandelson has also said he was intensely relaxed about people becoming filthy rich, a guaranteed vote winner with millions in poverty and approaching another million people out of work because of the Tories' mishandling of the COVID crisis. The same Boris Johnson Tories leaving Starmer flailing in their wake. Not satisfied with that, Mandelson went on to, quote, shake UK politics by meeting a Russian oligarch on his super yacht, where he chatted cosily with Tory then Shadow Chancellor George Osborne, and subsequently gave trade concessions that benefited the billionaire by an estimated 50 million. And of course, Mandelson was at the heart of attempts to overturn the Brexit referendum result as a director of Open Britain, which promoted the so-called People's Vote campaign, exactly the way to get to the hearts of the Leave voting towns Labour has to win back to even get a sniff of getting near Downing Street. Senior Labour backbencher John Trickett recently mocked the strategic genius of Starmer's disastrous tenure so far. It will be interesting to see what he and other working class MPs make of this latest fiasco, but it's a safe bet that working class voters will remain intensely unimpressed. That's from Squawkbox. Pretty much sums up. I thought I'd read that out to you because it sums up my thoughts on the matter entirely. This is the Peter Mandelson who famously said this.
A long-standing member of the Labour Party, and you love its roots, you like its values, and you look at previous governments, you see what they've achieved for our country. Why do you want to sort of walk away and just pass the title deeds of this great party over to somebody like Jeremy Corbyn?
Yeah.
I don't want it.
Yeah.
I resent it, and I work every single day in some small way to bring forward the end of his tenure in office. Every day. Something, however small it may be, an email, or a phone call, or a meeting I convene, or people I see, or Labour MPs I encourage, or young people I sort of take out and try and, galvanise them. Every day I try to do something to rescue the Labour Party from his leadership.
That's right. Every day he tries to sabotage Jeremy Corbyn. That's the guy we're dealing with here. Comparisons with New Labour, which were initially a little premature when it came to Starmer's leadership, obviously to the left of New Labour, are now becoming appropriate when you're bringing in people like this. This is a really clear statement of priorities. Both parties have had a role reversal. Earlier in the year, earlier last year, Labour was looking competent and together, and the Tories were in chaos, doing a reset every other week. Now Labour are in chaos, doing a reset every other week, and plummeting in the polls. Meanwhile, the Tories have finally got their shit together, and the country is back behind them. It's unfortunate, but it's where we are. And Peter Mandelson's record, right, his record of stuff he's said, stuff he's done, stuff he's been for, saying we're all Thatcherites now, pushing Labour ever closer to a free market absolutist position. He's completely just abysmal. Why would we want anything to do with him? Meanwhile, the Prime Minister should repay voters. Well, no progressive should want anything to do with him. That's why I left the Labour Party. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister should repay voters in the north of England who lent the Conservatives their vote at the latest election by unleashing billions of pounds of private investment, according to a report. The report is from an influential left-wing Centre for Policy Studies. It's produced with the Northern Research Group, Tory MPs in Northern England, the Scottish Borders and North Wales, and it argues that ministers should be able to harness the restless radicalism from those who voted for Brexit in 2016 and the Conservatives in 2019 by creating an economic big bang along the lines of the Thatcherite deregulation of the city in the 1980s, which reinforced London's position as a global financial centre. Now, it goes without saying that these ideas are obviously not going to save the North from the damage they've done to the North. Same tired old ideas will not work, won't cut it in terms of addressing regional inequities and levelling up. They just won't. However, at a surface level, putting investment on a sugar high, slashing regulation, it's all going to doom us all in the long run, be a race to the bottom, absolutely dreadful, something we should oppose with every bone in our body. However, at a surface level, it will help cement these levels for these areas for the Tories if there's a bit of performative investment here or there, or just the noise of it seems like they're doing something. Since the Labour Party did not much there for so long, and of course the Brexit divides split areas like that from Labour even more. It could pay off for them. But we're basically now getting Thatcherism, but for the red wall. Makes no sense. We're talking about private investment. It's obviously state cronyism, but it might work for them. Boris Johnson talking today on easing COVID restrictions at the press conference.
So this moment is a huge step forward, but it's only a first step. And while it shows what the country can do, we must be both optimistic but also patient. And next week I'll be setting out a roadmap saying as much as we possibly can about the route to normality, even though some things are very uncertain. Because we want this lockdown to be the last, and we want progress to be cautious but also irreversible. So please continue to stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives.
Johnson sounding much more sensible today, much more grown up. Only took 120,000 needless deaths. They need to hold fast against the right of their party, the hard right, in terms of, being sensible as it sounds like they're going to be when it comes to opening up. It's in their interests politically, so let's hope that means they do it. Here's Johnson talking about what's coming up next regarding the vaccine rollout.
The level of infection remains very high, with still more people still in hospital today than at the peak last April. And admissions across the UK, very important statistic, admissions running at 1,600 a day. So we have to keep our foot to the floor And I can tell you that today the next million letters are landing on people's mats right now, offering appointments to the over 65s. And we're also contacting all those aged between 16 and 64 with underlying health conditions, as well as adult carers. And if we can keep this pace up, and if we can keep supply steady, and I hope and believe we can, then we hope to offer a vaccination to everyone in the first 9 priority groups, including everyone over 50 by the end of April. And at the same time, we will be giving second doses to millions of the most vulnerable within 12 weeks of the first.
Look, it's all going well. It's really going well. The government will obviously get credit, but the reason it's going so well is because we have the best health service in the world. I'll quote from a Twitter thread I put up earlier. Johnson sounding much more cautious and sensible at tonight's presser. Only took 120,000 plus needless deaths for him to grow up. The government are absolutely basking in an undeniable success story thanks to the greatest health service in the world, able to do this even when it's been underfunded and privatised for decades, but especially the last 11. The aims for vaccinations up until April the 30th seem about right to me. Very much achievable if we keep up this pace. Journalists asking questions they know the PM won't answer and which are purely speculative rather than substantive. Not ideal. And much more informative outing from Johnson than usual. Let's see if he has the guts to take on the hard right of his party next week and actually be sensible about the reopening next month. I'm tentatively optimistic on that. Over to the United States and the Biden administration. Here's Joe Biden talking about impeachment and talks with President Xi of China.
I told you what I'm focused on. My job is to deal with the promises I made, and we all know we have to move on. Today it's about jobs and infrastructure. I, like other Americans, watched the news. I didn't watch any of the hearing live because I was going straight through last night till a little after 9. But I watched some this morning. I think the Senate has a very important job to complete, and I think my guess is some minds may have been changed, but I don't know. Last night I was on the phone for 2 straight hours with Xi Jinping, and you all know as well as I do. These folks, and it was a good conversation. I know him well. We spent a lot of time together over the years I was vice president, and you know, we don't get moving, they're gonna eat our lunch. They have major new initiatives on rail, and they already have rail that goes 225 miles an hour with ease. They're working very hard to do what I think we're gonna have to do, and I think the automobile industry is already there, and so is labor. They're working very hard to try to move in a position where they end up being the source of a new way in which to power automobiles and invest a lot of money. They're investing billions of dollars in dealing with a whole range of issues that relate to transportation, the environment, and a whole range of other things. So we just have to step up. And so what I'm going to talk to these folks about, since they're the key committee, is how we begin this. I've laid out what I think I have to do, we should be doing. They have a plan as well within their jurisdiction, but they're also very competent senators who know a lot more than beyond their jurisdiction about the things it needs. So I'm looking for a fulsome conversation. So.
Now, obviously, this was a few days ago. We originally talked about the call on the day it happened, however briefly, and of course, this was before the impeachment result, after which, basically after the acquittal, Biden was basically like, right, we move on. Talked about how democracy was fragile, but essentially he wants to get on. And I think that's right. I think it's absolutely right. Biden now has to get on with passing the American Rescue Plan, getting these things pushed through, because the Trumpist wing of the Republican Party, if anything, is now emboldened. The only way to combat that is with concrete legislative wins between now and 2022, and going forward between now and 2024. I thought it was also really interesting to hear, maybe for the first time, a reckoning on the part of a US president about the genuine challenges to their hegemony They welcome challenges in the sense anyone challenging US hegemony is welcome. But the challenges to US hegemony and imperialism that China prompts, China's existence is a headache for the US. We should not over-egg it. America, away and above, have the most powerful military, strongest economy in the world. Going by the typical conventional measures of neoliberal performance, right? That's not saying it's the best country to live in. It's really not, by a million different markers. But on that surface level, especially concerning military, they're away and above, right? They could blow up the world, blow up China, blow up Russia a million times over, okay? However, they are out of ideas, they are faltering, and we're seeing a reckoning of that from Joe Biden here, rather than just, oh, China bad. The thing that has to be avoided at all costs is Cold War posturing. Saying China's going to eat our lunch, saying China's going to come and sort of ruin everything for us. Look, yes, China's a competition for the United States. Competition is good. However, there's no need for a Cold War. There should never be a Cold War, but people saying China's a huge threat to America and ramping up Cold War tensions are absolutely wrong. China isn't going to start something with the US unless the US starts something with China. The reason for that is China doesn't have a death wish. Anyone who challenges America on the world stage at the moment has a death wish. We've seen what they do. We've got to talk about that. We've got to realise that. There was a good article from Branko Marketic in Jacobin saying the Biden era is witnessing a return of the military-industrial complex in Washington. One of the top national security think tanks backing the Biden administration, the Center for a New American Security, has been taking money from every major defense contractor while pumping out a steady stream of research supporting those companies' interests. It's yet another sign that Biden's promised return to normal has unfortunately arrived. The promise of a return to normal under Joe Biden always meant two possibilities. It could mean a hard break from the obscene, in-your-face corruption and self-dealing that defined Donald Trump's presidency, or it could mean going back to the kind of run-of-the-mill, revolving-door Washington corruption that Trump had pledged to clean up, but ended up wallowing in. Of course, the latter, not the former, is where we are. Joe Biden's approval ratings, 3 weeks in office, 37.3% of Americans disapprove, 54.6% of Americans approve. I think these ratings are as good as you could expect. Such a polarised time. Conventional historical measures, maybe not so vital. I think these are pretty good ratings considering how polarised things are. They are pretty impressive considering the circumstances, considering the impeachment, considering the fact half of the country don't believe the virus is a real threat, considering all these ludicrous things that most Western democracies haven't had to reckon with in terms of people rallying around the leader, because the facts are a little bit more appreciated in other countries, less so than it used to be. But facts are more digested in Europe and Britain than in America, which is completely on crack all of the time. Disapproval is going up. Battle lines are being drawn. That's also to be expected. The approval line hasn't really been flattening at all. If anything, it's been going up. But the disapproval line is also going up. As more people form an opinion, divide that line, that's basically the Trump base, 37%. That 37% will vote for the Republican 2024 nominee no matter what, no matter how extreme they are. That's why it doesn't matter how extreme the GOP goes, there'll always be those millions and scores of voters for them. The disapproval's going up, nothing to do about that. Keeping the approval up like that, 54, 55%, building that, keeping that locked in to vote for the next Democratic nominee is Biden's task, politically, I would say. Hideous normality is the watchword regarding foreign policy and most other areas for the Biden administration, but it does remain true that there are much more opportunities for the left to push the Biden administration than there were ever under Obama. But it does remain documented fact that these people are not our friends. They're not our friends. They are arm's length, basically opponents, but they're slightly not quite as bad as the fever dream, corrupt, regressive white supremacist GOP that we're dealing with right now. Though often they're not far off. Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell are absolutely grim, disgusting. The hypocrisy both of them have shown in terms of, well, many things, but mainly just their approach to the whole impeachment proceedings. Have a listen to this.
The biggest winner, I think, of this whole impeachment trial is Laura Trump. My dear friend Richard Burr, who I like and have been friends to a long time, just made Laura Trump almost a certain nominee for the Senate seat in North Carolina to replace him if she runs. And I'll certainly be behind her because I think she represents the future of the Republican Party.
You see, these people, right, used to paint themselves as moderates. They never were, but that's what they paint themselves at. All out the window. No principles. Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, they can critique whatever they like. Everything Trump has done is on their conscience. They are disgusting individuals. And I don't tend to get up here, get in front of a microphone and call people disgusting, but they just are. And they're big boys. I'm sure they can deal with it. John says GOP, gain or profit party. Precisely. They will gain and profit. And they'll happily gain and profit from white supremacy and violence, if that is profitable for them. If it's not, they'll stop. That's the thing. They have no commitment to anything. It's quite worrying. And there are red lines they'll cross that the Democrats won't, like inciting riots. All the critiques of Democrats, they won't go that far to please their corporate stooges. Although if corporate stooges wanted them to do that, who knows? Dominic Raab on Brexit is having a lovely time.
I think if you take a 10-year view, as well as looking at the short-term risk, which is right to do, actually the growth opportunities of the future are going to come from emerging and developing economies around the world, in particular the Indo-Pacific, and having the freedom and the latitude to create bespoke Britain-friendly and terms in relation to FTAs with those growth markets of the future is a huge opportunity. Of course, we want to also manage those short-term challenges and reduce and mitigate as far as we can the bureaucratic obstacles that the EU is imposing.
Now, I'm obviously coming at this not from sort of a full throttle Remain standpoint. I'm coming at this as a Eurosceptic, as someone who believes there are massive opportunities for the left to seize from Brexit under the right conditions. However, Dominic Raab is in denial here about the level of disruption, but also about the supposed benefit he can extract from the odd free trade deal here and there in Asia. It's more Thatcherite logic. He has no plans. The government have no plans. They have no plans to deal with the massive transformation the British economy is going to have to go through since we've gone for a maxed out hard Brexit. Dominic Raab cannot reckon with the project, the realities of the project he has advocated vociferously. If you're on the Tory right, surely you should have drawn up a set of ideas of what you want from your hard Brexit and how you're going to sell it, but also how you're going to implement it. The thing is, right, Eurosceptic thinkers on the left did have a very well drawn-out plan of a map, a pathway out of the EU, what they want to do immediately after they've left the EU. These people don't seem to know what they want to do with it. They've got everything they wanted on their terms. The free trade deal, the free trade agreement they signed with the EU was on their terms with their logic, their right-wing logic imprinted in it. So, like, what? Do you know what I mean? They've got this. This is what they wanted. It's their exact wish list. You can never don't have your cake and eat it. They've got the Brexit they wanted. What are they going to do with it? What are the plans? I've not seen them do anything, right? They've completely squandered it. What are you going to do about it? Just, everything's a bit more disruptive now, but we've got no vision to make that worthwhile. What's the point? Well, of course, they did have a bit of a vision, which was mass deregulation. But our wonderful trade unions in this country stopped that in its tracks, albeit temporarily. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Matt Hancock and his reforms for the NHS, you can have a little clip of him talking about it here.
Clinical decisions should always be independent, but when the NHS is the public's top domestic priority, with over £140 billion of taxpayers' money spent each year, and when the quality of our healthcare matters to every single citizen and every single one of our constituents, Mr. Speaker, of course the NHS must be accountable to ministers, ministers accountable to Parliament, and Parliament accountable to the people we all serve. Medical matters are matters for ministers. The White Paper provides a statutory basis for unified national leadership of the NHS, merging 3 bodies that legally oversee the NHS into one as NHS England. NHS England will have clinical and day-to-day operational independence, but the Secretary of State will be empowered to set direction for the NHS and intervene where necessary.
We are not surprised he has ended up here. We warned ministers not to go ahead with the Cameron-Lansley changes 10 years ago. A reorganisation so big you could see it from space. It cost millions. It demoralised staff. It ushered in a decade of wasted opportunity.
Now, of course, on an initial look at this the other day, any rolling back of those hideous reforms under the Cameron administration is in theory good. However, it was never going to be straightforward, and it is much more sinister than it appears on the surface. If handing Matt Hancock the NHS appears sinister, it gets a whole lot worse. So, the new plans would allow private companies to sit on boards that make decisions about how to spend NHS money, introduce the American model into our NHS, where unaccountable decision-making bodies prioritise profit margins and making savings over caring for people's health. This model is likely to lead to cuts and closures of NHS hospitals and A&E, push more people to go private as cuts are made. Patients have already been promised greater rights to choose private treatment and have it paid for by the NHS. And of course, opening the door to more cronyism, yet more contracts would be given to government pals like Serco, as we've seen in the pandemic without any competition. That's what the government means when they say reducing bureaucracy. Encouraging private companies to take the NHS to court if they're unhappy. That's the reality of what's going on here. It was never going to be simple. They're only going to change things if they've got an agenda that pleases their donors. The Tories despise the NHS, and they're getting away with this. They keep getting away with this every time they do it. Because all the media, including, liberal outlets, conservative outlets, the British establishment coalesces in Britain. They did this around the Lansbury reforms. They don't talk about the reality. They just read out the government press release and the nice wording that sounds nice and benign. They don't actually explain to the public what people are doing to our most cherished institution. If they'd done that throughout time, so many of the privatisation initiatives that have gone through wouldn't have been allowed to go through because they'd have been so bloody unpopular. But because it is disguised with nice-sounding buzzwords, and that everyone's complicit in that in the media, basically almost everyone in the British media, and anyone who says otherwise is accused of being conspiratorial, they get away with it. Meanwhile, there's a ridiculous headline in The Guardian. Brexit Britain's victory over the EU on COVID vaccination is not what it seems. The bloc's joint vaccine strategy, far from being a fiasco, is delivering a better outcome than the UK's. Now, let's all put the Brexit culture war aside. This is denial of reality. It's plain ridiculous. The numbers don't lie. Obviously, this is to stoke up a culture war, but I think most of us, whatever side of the Leave Remain divide we're on, let's not make it about that. Let's stop denying reality and sort of realise that it's just not... That's not true, right? The EU's vaccine rollout, because of their own sort of centralisation of power and refusal to do things in a way that would have been helpful for other EU nations and taking advantage of the fact they were in a bloc. Instead of doing that, they decided to do what they did. And they're living with the consequences. It's bad. Of course we wanted it to be a success. It wasn't. Britain's rollout has been a success, thanks to our wonderful NHS. Just the reality, okay? It's not a big Brexity statement. That's just how things have been. Coming up to 7:30, that's it from me today. Please subscribe, turn notifications on and like the video. MesmePolitics will be back for you from 7 p.m, same time, same place, right here, tomorrow. You have officially been brought up to date with all the latest on the first show of the week. All the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective. My name's Toby Lepati Mesme. I've been your host. I'll be back doing it all again tomorrow. We do it every day weekdays. Please email me, tobyjoshua2004@gmail.com, with anything you want us to talk about. Get me on Twitter @TobyJoshuaUK or on Medium @TobyJoshuaPolitics. And I'll see you soon.